podcast for radicals, part of the A Guide for Radicals series. A Guide for Radicals series is a collection of resources, online guides, courses, and web-based guides, all found on a Radical Guide site, designed to help people understand radical thought, connect with movements, and put radical principles into action. Whether you're a returning listener of a Radical Guide's other podcasts or just joining us for the first time, I'm excited to have you here. I'm your host, Jason Bayless, and today we're embarking on a journey into radical thought and action. If you're new here, let me briefly introduce who we are and what we're all about. A Radical Guide is a global project that amplifies voices for justice, liberation, and collective action. What began as a directory of radical locations around the world has evolved into a platform for education, organizing, mutual aid, and resource sharing. We connect people to movements, radical spaces, and histories of resistance. Let me share a bit about how it all started. A few years ago, I had the idea for a Radical Guide as I stood before a radical bookstore in Paris, France. The worn posters in the window, the scent of old paper, and the buzz of passionate conversations inside reminded me of similar spaces I'd encountered throughout my travels. These radical locations, bookstores, community centers, squats, are more than just physical spaces. They're living archives of revolutionary thought, incubators of transformative ideas, and gathering points for those who dare to imagine a different world. It struck me then how these hubs often go unnoticed by most people, despite their powerful histories and potential for change. In that moment, I realized I could create something to connect these places globally, and that idea became a Radical Guide. That moment of inspiration in Paris set the foundation for what a Radical Guide has become today, a platform for education, organizing, and resource sharing for radical action. A Guide for Radicals is a key part of this project. It is a comprehensive online guide exploring the history and evolution of radicalism while connecting theory to practical action. It aims to inspire collective efforts to challenge systems of oppression like capitalism, patriarchy, and colonialism, and offers strategies for building alternatives rooted in justice, autonomy, and mutual aid. Also included in this series is a course for radicals, which takes things further with interactive practical lessons that dive into each section of A Guide for Radicals. These courses are designed to help you sharpen your organizing skills, understand the historical context of radical thought, and apply radical principles in real-world activism. In this podcast, we'll weave insights from A Guide for Radicals and A Course for Radicals, exploring big ideas and offering practical ways to take action. Whether you're here to deepen your understanding or get hands-on with organizing, we're here to explore these ideas together. Links to these resources are in the description, or you can visit radicalguide.com to explore them in depth. Today, we're starting with the basics. What is radicalism? In a world grappling with escalating crises, from climate change to systemic racism and economic inequality, radicalism takes on renewed urgency and relevance. Today, radicalism is applied across various struggles, from economic justice and labor rights to gender liberation and environmental justice. But what does radical really mean? Why do people often think it's extreme or chaotic? Let's talk about what radicalism means. Radical thought isn't new. It's been part of human history, from ancient philosophers like Diogenes challenging social conventions to Enlightenment thinkers questioning traditional authorities. This rich tradition of critique is what shapes radical action today, highlighting the urgent need for systemic change. People often think of radical as extreme or chaotic, but really, it's about digging deep, getting to the root of what's wrong, and imagining something better. The word radical comes from the Latin radix, which means root. Radicalism is all about getting to the root of societal problems. Radicalism seeks to dismantle oppressive systems like capitalism, white supremacy, patriarchy, and colonialism to address the root causes of inequality and injustice. Let's clear up a big misconception. Many people think radicalism is inherently violent or destructive, but the truth is, many radical movements focus on building alternatives to the systems they oppose. Take mutual aid, for example. It's about communities supporting each other directly without relying on the state or corporations. This is radical, but it's not about chaos. It's about creating networks of care that reflect the kind of world we want. This idea is known as prefigurative politics, living the values of the future society we want to create. In short, it means being the change you wish to see. So, while some think radicalism is just about tearing things down, it's equally about building something better. This brings us to a crucial question. How does radicalism differ from reformism? Both aim to address social issues, but they have different goals. Reformism tries to make existing systems work a bit better. It's about tweaking the rules to improve a broken system. Radicalism, on the other hand, sees these systems like an old, worn out machine. Reformists might keep trying to repair it, but radicals would say, let's build something entirely new that works for everyone. Now that we've discussed radicalism, let's examine how lessons from past radical movements can help us tackle today's urgent challenges. The global pandemic, the climate crisis, economic inequality, and the rise of authoritarianism aren't isolated issues. They are deeply connected symptoms of systemic problems that require a radical response. The pandemic showed just how fragile our current systems are. Governments were quick to bail out corporations while communities struggled to meet basic needs. Climate change keeps accelerating, but those in power offer only superficial solutions, small reforms that don't address the root cause, an economic system that puts profit over the planet. To understand why radicalism is crucial today, let's look at what radical action has accomplished in the past. Radicalism's importance isn't just about current events, it's rooted in a long history of struggle. Radical movements throughout history have shown us that transformative change is possible, even when the odds are against us. Take the abolitionist movement, for instance. Abolitionists didn't want to make slavery more humane, they demanded its complete abolition. Just as abolitionists fought to end slavery, today's anti-carceral movements are working to abolish systems of mass incarceration that perpetuate racial and economic injustice. Through persistent radical action, they dismantled one of history's most entrenched systems of oppression. Or think about the labor movements of the early 20th century. They fought for workers' rights, fair wages, and safe working conditions, recognizing that the capitalist system inherently exploits labor. Their struggles led to significant victories, like the 8-hour workday and the weekend, demonstrating that collective action can bring about profound social change. One of the most powerful aspects of radicalism is that it puts power back in the hands of ordinary people. Radicalism doesn't wait for governments or corporations. It's about recognizing our collective power to create change ourselves. It's about organizing, building alternatives, and challenging oppressive systems. It's about reclaiming our agency and shaping a future that reflects our values. Radicalism is inherently liberatory. It stands in stark contrast to reactionary movements like white nationalism or fascism, which seek to reinforce oppression. Let's bring it all together. Now, let's break down some key characteristics and principles that define radical movements. Radicalism isn't a rigid ideology. It's a dynamic set of ideas and practices that adapt to different contexts. But there are core principles that unite radical movements across various struggles and guide their organization, resistance, and creation of alternatives. Radical movements aren't just about addressing immediate problems. They strive for deep, systemic changes that fundamentally alter society. This means imagining a world without hierarchies of power and domination. It asks, what would a truly just world look like, and how do we get there? Radical movements recognize that individual action alone isn't enough to challenge entrenched power structures. Collective action, solidarity, and community organizing are essential to dismantling oppressive systems. This means building movements where power is shared and decisions are made collectively, ensuring everyone has a voice. A powerful idea in radicalism is prefigurative politics. As mentioned earlier, it is about embodying the values of the future society we're fighting for right now. Instead of waiting for a distant revolution to create a just society, prefigurative politics encourages us to start living those values today. Think about how you could start embodying these values today. How can you create the kind of relationships and communities that reflect the future you want? It's about rejecting the notion that the ends justify the means. Our methods should align with the values of the society we want to create. This means creating structures and relationships that reflect the egalitarian, cooperative world we want, like worker cooperatives, where workers own and manage the business collectively, or mutual aid networks that provide support outside state or corporate control, fostering solidarity and interdependence. Think of examples like the Zapatista movement in Chiapas, Mexico, emphasizing community based governance, or the Standing Rock protests, which united indigenous resistance to corporate power with a broader environmental justice movement. The land back movement also offers a new way of understanding societal relationships with land, challenging traditional concepts of ownership. Building these alternatives requires us to recognize how interconnected our struggles are. This is where intersectionality comes in, helping us understand how different forms of oppression, like racism, sexism, homophobia, and ableism, are all connected and affect people in complex ways. For example, addressing climate justice must also tackle systemic racism, as marginalized communities are often most affected by environmental destruction. Radicalism understands that all these struggles are interconnected. It means recognizing that we don't experience oppression in isolation, but as individuals with multiple intersecting identities. Radical movements that embrace intersectionality work to build coalitions across different struggles, understanding that our liberation is connected. For example, a movement for racial justice must also address economic inequality because these forms of oppression reinforce each other. With this understanding of interconnected struggles, radical movements also prioritize direct action, bypassing traditional power channels and taking matters into our own hands. Instead of waiting for rights or justice to be granted, direct action means acting to meet our needs, defend our communities, and disrupt systems of oppression. We've also seen the power of direct action recently, such as during the COVID-19 pandemic, when mutual aid networks stepped up to support communities that were overlooked by government policies. Direct action can take many forms: protests, strikes, occupations, or building alternatives like free clinics and mutual aid networks. As David Graeber, an anthropologist and influential anarchist thinker, described it, the classic definition of direct action is if there's a community that doesn't have drinking water, instead of petitioning the governor or protesting, you go and dig the well yourself and dare them to stop you. We've explored what radicalism is, why it's so important right now, and the principles that guide radical movements. So, what's next? How do we move from understanding to action? Radicalism isn't just theory, it's about action. Radicalism is also not monolithic. It's filled with debates, such as whether violence can ever be justified or how structured leadership fits into horizontal organizing. Take a moment to reflect. What systemic issues exist in your community that need more than just a quick fix? For example, consider housing insecurity, food deserts, or inadequate healthcare access. How might a radical approach address the root cause of these issues? These nuances are part of what makes radicalism dynamic. How can you bring these ideas into your own life and community? First, keep learning about different aspects of radicalism, such as mutual aid, direct action, and building autonomous communities. But learning is just the first step. Radicalism is constantly evolving, and there's always more to discover. We've touched on key concepts, but the A Guide for Radicals series dives deeper into each topic. Use it to explore the history, strategies, and philosophies that shape radical movements. Check out A Course for Radicals to hone your practical skills. Whether you're interested in mutual aid, direct action, or building collective power, the course provides tools and strategies to help you put radical principles into action. Learning alone isn't enough. Radicalism calls for action. The knowledge you gain equips you to take meaningful steps toward change. Collective power is at the core of radical thought. Look for ways to connect with others. Just like I decided to create a radical guide, you can take that first step to bring about change in your community. Think about how you can start building alternatives in your community, whether it's joining a local group, participating in a mutual aid project, or simply starting conversations about radical ideas. What can you do today? Are there local groups in your area organizing around issues like housing justice, climate action, or anti racism? Reach out and get involved. If you can't find a group that aligns with your values, consider starting one. You could organize a mutual aid network in your neighborhood, participate in community defense, or build a worker cooperative. If you're not sure where to start, join a mutual aid group, attend a community meeting, or get involved in a local effort fighting for tenants' rights. Radicalism is about taking direct action to meet your community's needs. It's about creating change now, not waiting for permission. Now it's your turn. How will you take the first step toward creating radical change? Remember, even the smallest action contributes to larger change. Radical change isn't a distant dream, it's something we create together. Your participation matters. This podcast is just one part of our work at A Radical Guide. If it resonates with you, we encourage you to explore more of our resources, whether through the website, our online courses, or by connecting with the global community of organizers taking action. Visit radicalguide.com to sign up for our newsletter and be the first to access new resources, upcoming events, and ways to get involved. By connecting with A Radical Guide, you join a global community of people committed to justice and collective action. The path to collective liberation is a journey we take together. If you want to support us, consider donating to A Radical Guide. Your contributions help us sustain our projects and support ongoing efforts for justice, mutual aid, and collective liberation. Every donation makes a real difference. Thank you for joining us on A Podcast for Radicals. Stay connected by subscribing, following us online, and engaging with communities of radicals worldwide. Your voice and actions matter. Together we can make a difference, and every single one of us has a role in building a better future. And remember, follow ideas, not people.